Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back for another round.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be here.
Yeah, here we are at the beginning of October 2025. Been an interesting summer, interesting year, and we've got some interesting stories to look at this week, starting with a look at the superpower building, which I just can't get over the fact that it's the SP building.
Well, the official name is the Flag Building, but at the time I wrote this story for the Village Voice, it was still being called the Superpower Building. This was a story that I did way back in 2012. What happened was somebody gave me a DVD. It was just a blank DVD, looked like a blank DVD, and I put it in my computer. I couldn't believe it. It was all the renderings and architectural drawings for this superpower building that had been leaked to me. And I just thought they were amazing. So I put together this story for the Village Voice back in January 2012, I think it was, more than a year before that building opened up. That's 13 years ago. So you can go to the Village Voice website now and find those stories. It's not easy, but if you do find them, all the pictures are gone. That's just the way websites get when they get old, right? So I did a little hunting around and I managed to find almost all the original images. And I thought, I'm going to put this on a new home. And so I posted it on my Substack. Three articles. One I posted on Sunday, two on Monday, of just these wacky things they've got. First of all, the first thing, I think the first impression you get is just how massive this thing is. It's a full city block. It's got 7 floors, and there's auditing rooms, there's classrooms, there's reception areas, and there's this giant atrium. And we have some pretty good images of all of those things. And then we have some images of the way that it's really supposed to be kind of a shrine to L. Ron Hubbard and the Apollo and that kind of thing. Also, one of the things I thought was most valuable about this was there's this area dedicated to showing all of Scientology's front groups. They're all there: Applied Scholastics, Narconon. So any question about the connection between those groups and Scientology, it's just right there. These are part of the Church of Scientology. And then, of course, there's the 5th floor. That's the thing everybody wants to see. That's the superpower floor, where you get to do something with your perceptics. Hubbard called them. You and I might have 5 senses, but Hubbard said we had 57 perceptics. And Dan Kuhn explained to me that when you pay, you pay your $30,000 or $40,000 to get superpower, you're not necessarily using those contraptions. That they would only use those contraptions if there was some hang up in your auditing on these rundowns. But they look amazing. I mean, it looks like a floor from the Starship Enterprise, and a few of those images had been leaked before that. But this is the most views we've ever gotten on it is from this story. Now, in the years since, there have been some Source magazine publications that give a few more looks inside there. But this is still the most complete, picture we have of what the place is supposed to look like. And you can see that it's supposed to wow people. And I don't doubt that it does. When people first go there, like, wow, can I get in there and do that? And then there's the 6th floor, which is really one gigantic domed area, darkened with a lighted column in the center for people to run around. It's the what do they call it again? What's the running program called? The
Pause Resurgence Rundown.
Pause Resurgence Rundown. Thank you. Yeah, you're paying $5,000 or something to run around a pole until you hallucinate, basically. And then
basically,
and then the 7th floor is Dave's floor. It's the RTC floor, and we actually get to see what his office looks like, and even his bathroom. I always thought it was amazing that we actually got a couple of views of his bathroom, and then his own little patio terrace.
Yep.
And I just thought, an enterprising drone pilot might take a look at that. And, if you ever see a figure on that little seventh floor terrace, it's either got to be Dave or one of his guests. So that's something to keep an eye on. But anyway, I don't endorse that. Anyway, but I just thought it was fascinating. Somebody had asked me about those. I'm really glad I went and got those and reposted them now on my Substack, which is such a beautiful, clean platform, no ads. And yeah, it's fun to see that after all these years, and really, it still holds up as far as the best view that we've seen of the superpower. Now, if you walked in there today, would it look exactly like that? I'm sure there are some differences, but the views that we've gotten, it does look like that. Particularly if you think about when Dave kicked off the Scientology TV, he was standing in that atrium, and you can see that atrium is exactly like those architectural drawings. So yeah,
That's right.
one of the biggest ambitious things Dave has ever done is raise money for that thing for 20 years. It did finally open in 2013. I think it was October. And yeah, it's I don't know, it's a monument to Dave's ego, if you ask me.
Well, very, very, I mean, very much so. And he's clearly compensated. I mean, this thing is takes it dominates the Clearwater skyline.
Yeah.
When you go to Clearwater and see this thing, it's this big box that just sits across from the Fort Harrison. And this article you published this week is actually the most extensive, all the illustrations, literally blueprint shots
Yeah.
of this building and all the renderings. And what you see over and over again in this is a clear effort to make it look very super futuristic, Star Warsian, sort of very spaceship like. The rounded edges of the hallways and stuff makes it look like you're walking down a spaceship hallway. And I know Miscavige gets off on stuff like that. It's its own little world, right? Which is it kind of exactly what a cult like Scientology is. It's a little bubble world, and so we're going to create this little world for you. Um,
Well, also when you're looking at those, particularly that blueprint of the sixth floor,
mm-hmm,
one of the things that strikes me is besides that gigantic running dome are
mm-hmm,
the hundreds of little auditing rooms. And
yeah,
Jefferson Hawkins made a comment at my Substack saying, years before that place was even started building, we had to do planning on that. And the question was, how do we fill it with people?
yep.
And Jefferson said it was very obvious that they never could. Think about, I mean, when you've got a couple of hundred auditing rooms and maybe three of them are being used at any one time, imagine what a creepy, empty place that must be most of the time, right?
That's exactly what I was going to comment on, is how empty this place must be. These photos, these renderings, might as well be photos of the place without any people in it, because that's kind of how it's got to be. Even with Clearwater being the sort of mecca, as they used to say, or the center of Scientology operations, and whales and wealthy Scientologists flying in, and staff flying in from all over the world to do services there, you're right. There's no way even half of these auditing rooms are being filled up on a daily
Have
basis.
ever been used.
Exactly, right? And so what are they doing here? So in a way, it's sort of Dave's monument to his own ineptitude, because he's going to
Yeah,
be reminded daily, that this place is empty.
yeah,
But he gets to sit up at the very top and not pay any attention to anything going on below.
right.
Again, how symbolic. All right, let's go ahead and move on. But this is a great story, and it's really worth looking at all those photos. It's what is it, sterile. It's beautiful, but it's sterile.
Yeah, yeah,
There's just
yeah.
there's no human element. And would we be surprised by that, given this is David Miscavige's love child here?
Right.
Okay, now we're going to move on. You showed a video of some promo coming out of the United Kingdom for this upcoming IAS event, and it
Oh,
was a little tongue in cheek and supposed to be a little fun, but still, when is this thing happening? What's going on? What you want to give a rundown on
I
this?
know, it's this is the third video we've had now. There was one with the Jive Aces telling Scientologists, save the date. in October. We can't tell you what date, but save the date. So I guess you're supposed to save the whole October. That was followed by a young man who did sort of a imitation of the Avengers, and the original, and or James Bond kind of thing. And again, he said save the date, no date. And now the third one is aimed at Spanish speakers on the continent, right? They want people to come over from Europe to come to this thing. And it was interesting because she's talking about needing a permit visa now. See, now since Brexit, you can't just take the channel over and just, you have to have a particular entry visa. And so she's
Ah.
reminding people you need to get that. You need to make sure you have your IAS card and get yourself over here. And again, no date. Now, I can tell you that Alex reminded me that the last 2 years they did reveal the date about October 3rd or October 4th or 5th. So sometime in the next day and a half or 2 days, we're probably going to get the date. And then of course it'll need to be later, much later in the month. Maybe it's going to be a Halloween IAS this year, Chris. I don't know. But yeah, it's funny that they're not releasing information about that.
No, they're really holding it close, and you have to wonder about the other thing that you posted about, because we've been talking back and forth for weeks now about these approvals and permits, and are they going to get okay for this? And Scientology ended up surprising us by putting in an application for a much grander thing, of which the tent was only, oh yeah, of course we'll have the tent in here too. But then we got news this week that the great crested newt might be getting in the way of this.
Yeah, so you're right. Scientology, I think they, for some reason, they don't want to just go to the council and say, "So can we have a tent?" I guess they're really worried that they're going to say no. So instead, they ask for the moon. They say, "We want to put in a car park with 600 spaces. We want to put in a permanent bathroom building here. We're going to put permanent footing for the tent." I mean, the tent's going to be there, of course. They don't want to be put on the spot about the tent. And they went ahead and put the tent up anyway, right? Well, right away, Alex pointed out that there's problems with this application. There are things in here they've applied for in the past and not gotten, but they're taking another shot at it. And already the East Grinstead Town Council says no, we can't sign off on this. The West Sussex County Council is saying there's not enough information here about how building a car park might affect flooding, down the river. And now a third objection, and this is the wildest one. So I wasn't aware of this creature, but apparently people in England have heard about this all the time. It becomes an issue a lot with building over there. They have this wonderful little, and I say little amphibian. Actually, it's called the great crested newt because it's quite large as newts go.
Mm.
And it's an issue in England. You can't just build without showing your new car park or shopping mall or apartment building or house is not going to affect great crested newt habitat. Well, a nonprofit that specializes in that was asked to look at this proposal. They produced a map, which I reproduced on the Substack, that shows that Scientology's proposed project is almost entirely inside the highest great crested newt impact area.
Oops.
So there's just no question that this kind of a project would need special care to make sure that they aren't, affecting these amphibians. So Scientology had anticipated that, and in their proposal, they said, "Listen, we know this is great crested newt territory. We're just going to be really careful, but we want to do it in a non-licensed way." In other words, they don't want any specialist environmentalists coming down and getting in their faces, right? Well, this environmental group said, "No, that's not good enough. We can't trust
No.
you to do it without licensed people." So they are rejecting it. They say that you should not give this approval until they are ready to allow licensed people to come in and make sure they do things right. So again, three strikes. Now it goes to the Mid Sussex District Council. They've got East Grinstead saying no. They've said West Sussex saying we don't have enough information about flooding. They've got the Newt people saying don't mess with our amphibians. Now, what is the Mid Sussex District Council going to do? And the tent's already up. I mean, it's just crazy. It's just a crazy situation. And again, we don't even have the date. And I like what Alex is always saying. Alex is always saying, just have it somewhere else. Look, the LRH birthday, they have it in a arena, the Ruth Eckerd
Yep.
Hall. Go have
Yep.
this thing in a hall somewhere. Stop setting up a tent in an area that's like very environmentally sensitive. So we'll see. It's coming down to the wire, man.
Wow. Wow. Well, Dave wants what Dave wants. And the UK government just better bend the knee. And that's just how it is. Come on now. Let's get our priorities straight. Okay, now we have been discussing for a little while now, for some months, of this Dianetics campaign, and it apparently appears to me to be one of the best kept secrets. This so-called promotional campaign. I don't see it in my area, but you posted a video of
Yeah.
somebody recording a video of this promotional campaign. What do we know about this?
That was in LA. It was a
Mm-hmm.
local TV station, a station I used to watch when I lived in LA, Channel 5, KTLA.
Mm-hmm.
David Miscavige put out a 75th anniversary edition of Dianetics this year. As we said before, we're calling it Taylor's version because Taylor Swift is actually named in this new edition of Dianetics.
That's right.
This is the first TV ad I've seen for it, and again, it was on local TV in LA. So I don't know. We'd like to hear from people. If you've seen it, let us know if you've seen it and where you are. But Dave's spending some money at least to get the word out. But it's the same thing, isn't it? That you saw the ad.
Same old, same old. I was expecting something more. It's kind of funny because I know Scientology so well, so I always know what they're going to do. But then at the same time, I'm always like, "Come on, guys, surprise me! Give me something new, right?" And this Dianetics ad is almost copy paste from the 1980s and 90s when they held their whole, the human mind, the battleground, for the human mind. Dianetics. It's the only thing that'll help you. Mark Headley was in those ads, by the way, back in the day. Remember those things? But now they're bringing back the 80s, the the music
Oh
and all
yeah,
that stuff. Jeff Levin's music,
right.
and Jeffrey Hawkins' campaign, right? So, but it's other than some fast editing, there really is no difference between this and what was done back in the 80s. So I'm predicting that this is going to fall flat, as we've said, because it doesn't really inform or entice people in today.
I mean, look, they're trying to convince people that a book that came out in 1950 has cutting edge information about how to understand your own brain and make your life better. That's a big job to try to convince people of that.
That's right.
And the only thing they can do is make it a mystery sandwich, make it real slick, make it seem like, ooh, it's cutting edge, it's cool. And it's just not working. I mean, we know that the demand is not what it used to be. But see, here's the thing: a few people will see that and go, "Gosh, that looks kind of interesting. I better check that out." I mean, there have always been a certain small set of the population that is intrigued by it, that reaches out and gets involved. There's always been but Scientology has always only appealed to a small percentage of the population, and an ad
Correct.
like this is not going to change that.
That's right. But unfortunately, word on the inside, at least from what I've heard from a few, inside sources that come across my plate every now and again, is that this is being touted as, Dianetics is going to be on the lips of everybody. That we're going to have to prepare for the massive influx of people coming in demanding Dianetics. Like on the inside, this is the word, and it's a little
But see,
pathetic.
that's what they're told to expect every time an ideal org opens. It's like
That's
this is the
right.
one. This is the
Same.
one people are going to come in.
Oh, they're going to flood in. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
In the time since Dianetics has come out, we have had cognitive dissonance theory. We have had Lifton break down what thought reform and the psychology of totalism is about. We have learned about snapping. We have learned about identity theory. We have learned about PTSD and complex PTSD. We have had Bessel van der Kolk write The Body Keeps the Score, which is your manual on human trauma, basically a Bible on trauma. And all of that has happened since Dianetics. And you make such a great point. So I just wanted lay that out, because look at all the things we have learned, and that's just off the top of my head, just a few key, very important psychological things that have come out that L. Ron Hubbard had no idea about, had never heard of, didn't know anything about. Dianetics is so ancient and outmoded. I mean, if I tried to cite research, from 1950 in any article I wrote in academia, I'd be laughed out of the hall, right?
Right.
Come on. So, yeah, very good point. Now, we also have Scientologists' coolest naysayers, and an article
Oh.
going back to some talk on this. What was this about?
Yeah, so I have a researcher that dives into these old newspaper archives, and every once in a while finds something really cool. And he found some really neat stuff. And I recently we talked about 1952 when Hubbard came out with this thing called the GE, right, genetic
Right.
entity.
Yeah.
And then we talked about 1959 when he did the Manual of Justice. Well, the latest stuff I was getting was right back to the beginning, the first weeks and months after Dianetics was published in May 1950. Admittedly, a time that I haven't looked at all that closely before.
Hmm.
So I was intrigued, but before I got too into it, I decided to go back and look at Russell Miller. Okay, I've read Barefaced Messiah numerous times, but I always like to refresh my memory about it. And I went back and read the chapters for that very early period, 49, 50, 51, and I was just astonished all over again. I mean, Russell's book is so incredible. His sourcing is so amazing. And
Yes.
he's got that 1950, that year 1950, he's got what Hubbard was doing and where he was practically every week of the year. So I just wanted to lay that out, that I love going back and digging up new stuff, but I always want to point out I'm just adding footnotes to what Russell Miller did. Okay, he what he did was monumental. But we have a couple of fun footnotes this week. One of which was my researcher that goes through newspaper archives had this brilliant idea. It's like, okay, Hubbard was in 1950 when this book came out. You have to know, L. Ron Hubbard was well known as a science fiction writer, pulp writer, adventure writer, who had been in Astounding magazine, and so that's why he went to John W. Campbell, and they printed a preview basically of Dianetics in Astounding a few weeks before the book came out. And
That
so
was the Terra Incognita article.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And so it's important to remember that the first Dianeticists, what made Dianetics so popular those first few weeks, the first few months, 1950, was that a lot of them were already people who were familiar with Hubbard's fiction, people who enjoyed science fiction, people who were science fiction fans.
Yep.
And so this researcher thought, I bet there's something in the fanzines from then. When I think fanzines, I think of the 80s and 70s and 80s. I didn't even realize there were science fiction fanzines from the 40s and 50s. I was fascinated when he sent some of them to me. I was digging through them, and I wasn't necessarily looking at the Scientology. I was reading everything. I was just, this is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, of several mentions about Hubbard and that kind of thing. But the best one was this fanzine called Western Star, which was a fanzine about California science fiction fans. And the author of the fanzine was writing about a convention that happened in Portland called NorwestCon. And I don't know the exact date that it happened, but his report about it, he dated September 10th, 1950. Well, that's exactly 1 month after Hubbard's notorious appearance at the Shrine Auditorium with Sonia Bianca and that whole thing. So this is right at the beginning. The book had been published in May. There'd been some publicity. The Astounding thing was in April, I think, and then Hubbard made his big appearance in August in L.A. Now it's September, and he's reporting about this convention. And I don't know if you were as surprised as I was, but he was saying that there were no plans to talk about Dianetics, but that doesn't matter. It's the hottest thing in fandom right now. I was like, really? The hottest thing in science fiction fandom in September 1950 was Dianetics. That's fascinating. But also that the Dianetics fans that were there were really pushy jerks. That was so funny. And I love what he said that, I've seen an L. Ron Hubbard lecture about this before, and all it was a series of wisecracks. And I was like, exactly. That's exactly what a Hubbard lecture is. And in this particular convention, Hubbard wasn't there, but two very well-known figures spoke for him. Forrest Ackerman, his literary agent and a famous science fiction, aficionado of the era, spoke, and Theodore Sturgeon did. And so, a really fascinating report from that convention. And what I also wanted to point out, another thing that my researcher had showed me, was that same week that fanzine came out, there was a series in the LA Daily News, which may be one of the first to really take apart Dianetics.
Hmm.
I know this. I've touted the Scientific American review before by oh gosh, I'm gonna forget his name. I'll say he's in the movie Oppenheimer. But anyway,
Oh,
um,
right. I'm sorry, I forget his
we
name
talked
too.
about that. Anyway,
That's right.
so I love that review in Scientific American, but this was a multi-part series in the LA Daily News in the first week of September, and it concluded with this piece. What they interviewed Hubbard and got this series of photos that we all know, but I don't know how many of us know that's where those photos came from. It was that series from the LA Daily News in September 1950.
Okay.
And so I knew people were going to enjoy seeing those photos again. And then the final installment in that series was published September 9th, so the day before that fanzine came out. And it was after they'd interviewed Hubbard and they just talked about what Dianetics was. Now they gave the sort of experts the final word, and they managed to get one of the most famous psychiatrists in the country, William Menninger. William Menninger and his brother Carl Menninger were two of the most famous psychiatrists in the country at that time. They ran the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas,
Yep.
and were major figures. And it's kind of interesting that the LA Daily News, which wasn't even the most important paper in LA, got William Menninger to just like denounce Scientology in no uncertain terms. Well, there's another researcher who likes to send me stuff. And he wanted me to know that there's a story behind that. And I said, really, what is it? And so he had found some really interesting correspondence and things in old archives. I don't think anybody, I did point out that Russell Miller does mention the Menninger Clinic in his book because, so the LA Daily News was September, and then in December, Look Magazine had an article that had Menninger denouncing Scientology as well. And so really interesting. And so the second researcher, a friend of mine, said, I've got some good stuff on that. What had happened was very soon after Dianetics was published, a professor at the University of Texas, Austin, wrote to the publisher saying he was really interested in these ideas and was hoping to talk to somebody about them, wanted to know if there was any Dianeticists in his area in Texas, and mentioned that he was associated with the Menninger Clinic. Well, that's all the Dianeticists needed, right? Back in the Dianetics foundations in New Jersey, they just started telling people, oh, the Menninger Clinic endorses Dianetics and they're using it there, right? They just started spreading that all over the place. People actually started applying for Dianetics auditing at the Menninger Clinic,
Oh my
right?
God.
Yeah, can you imagine? It'd be like, I don't know. You can imagine what it'd be like.
Yeah, I get it. I
Crazy.
get it.
The Menninger brothers like, what's going on? Because the LA Daily News had pointed out the big figures in mental health have really not said anything about this book. But the
Yeah.
Menninger brothers like, what's going on? And this Sutherland guy, this professor at UT Austin, wrote this very apologetic memo to them, which my researcher had found and gave me a copy of. It's fascinating, where he was saying, look, I sent them this letter. I mentioned the clinic. I shouldn't have. Now they're talking about, now you're getting applications. I'm really sorry. What can I do to make it up? So that's why I think William Menninger and Carl Menninger realized, look, the public already thinks that we're doing this stuff. We can't stay silent. And so that's why, beginning in September through the rest of the year, it was the Menninger brothers that were denouncing Scientology quite loudly and very, very harshly in numerous publications, pamphlets, letters, government reports. It was the Menningers leading this, drumbeat against Dianetics. Well, the Dianeticists weren't going to take that sitting down. So the other thing this researcher found was that A.E. Van Vogt, right, really interesting science fiction writer from the same era as Hubbard, who had also been publishing and Astounding and those things. He was a very, very big early Dianeticist, to the point where Hubbard actually appointed him to run the L.A. Dianetics Foundation. And he wrote a letter to the managers and said, "Look, can I come out and show you how this works?" Right? And they're like, "No, this isn't science. We don't want anything to do with you." To the point where he was calling them, and they were writing memos about it. Van Vogt was not. I mean, so numerous back and forths that I was able to document with the help of this researcher. Really fascinating. And then finally, in February 51, of course, we know in 51 everything fell apart for Hubbard, and he had to regroup in 52. But early in 51, the Elizabeth, New Jersey Dianetics Foundation actually sent a challenge to the Menninger Clinic and copied it to the American Psychiatric Association, saying, "Look, let's take a couple of neurotics and you guys treat them for a couple of weeks, and then we'll test them psychometrically, and then we'll treat them for a couple of weeks, and we'll test them psychometrically, and we'll see who does better," right? And the managers didn't respond, but the APA did. And it was really interesting. They're saying this is so irresponsible that it's so unscientific, and if anything, it would put these people at risk. Are you nuts? Leave us alone. And that was the end of the war. But I just thought it was really fascinating that there was this really interesting war between Dianetics and the Menninger Clinic in that first year of the movement. And I really want to thank both my researchers that got us this stuff, because that's an era that, like I said, I didn't know really well. That very early history of 5051. And I just thought it was fascinating to find out why these two high profile psychiatrists were so vocal. Because even today, Chris, Scientology continues to attack psychiatry at every turn. And for the most part, the large figures in psychiatry just ignore it, which I think they're smart to do. But
Absolutely.
for a short time there, they had some real big guns going at them.
Oh, big time. And you can understand why, because the public was electrified by Dianetics. It produces peak experiences, and people were like, "Oh, this is amazing, right? Right in my living room. How come psychiatry doesn't know about this?" And of course, 1950 psychiatry looked pretty different from psychiatry today. Let's remember that. So, the idea of guys in lab coats was not really, I mean, that was kind of the positioning back then. And yeah, they were up to some nonsense, but the Scientologists weren't solving any of that nonsense. And then, it's really peak Hubbard that on the verge, knowing what we know now, on the verge of their skipping town out of Elizabeth, New Jersey, because they were practicing medicine without a license and about to get busted for it, they're issuing challenges to the Menninger Clinic. Like, it was just like a month before, they were folding up their operation and
That's right.
hightailing it out to Kansas, to Wichita, because they had to fold up operations in Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, where's Hubbard? Hubbard kidnaps his daughter and is down in Cuba. I mean, the story is just insanely outlandish, right? If anybody ever made a movie about what really went down,
Yeah.
oh man, it would be awesome. But it does, but all of this, I wanted to say, speaks to the excitement and real best-selling, wave, the Dianetics wave that hit America in 1950, and how people were caught a little bit on their back feet, defending or fighting back against it. And it took months for established psychiatrists and psychologists to figure out what this was all about, respond to all this hype, because people were just like, what? And then tell people, in pretty classic bad PR strategy, "Oh, no, 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 this is all just horrible and you just shouldn't do it." but I'm blown out of my head, but I'm so excited, and of course this is where, you know, this comes from. But they it, it's just so Hubbardarian. Everything about this year is just so peak Hubbard. And I guess I just wanted to say that, it's
Yeah.
just all this stuff.
I thought
Hubbard
uh, I
ends up
thought one
ta-
I thought one thing that I think it was
oh yeah.
One thing that Carl Manager said really rang true with some of my readers, and I thought it was really smart. He was saying even if using Dianetics doesn't harm you, it may prevent some people from getting real care that they need. And I
Exactly.
thought that was so smart for him to say that.
I agree completely. Agreed completely. Um, Well, okay. Now we move on to our last story, which is um, Patty Moyer and a psych convention. And this is a little bit of a story from the psych point of view. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was fascinating. I didn't know about this secret meeting. Scientology's always attacking psychiatry. I mean, they're just carrying out L. Ron Hubbard's. He declared war on psychiatry in 1967,
He did.
and they're still fighting that fight. And for the most part, like I said, psychiatrists ignore it. But Scientology shows up with these protests at their annual convention and all that. And I think the psychiatrists were curious about who are these people? What is this all about? So in what year did she say it was? It was
Oh,
2007, did she say?
something like that. I will look it up here. Summer of 2007.
Yeah, summer of 2007. Patty said she was approached and asked to take part in this secret meeting. And she went and talked about some of the precautions they took, like it was going to be at their annual convention, but it wasn't in the convention program or anything. And they wanted it to be a nationwide thing. So two psychiatrists from each state were invited. So you had 100 psychiatrists, and then three people were asked to give presentations. Besides Patty, was Peter Alexander, who's no longer on the scene anymore, but he was very active at that time. An former OT7 Scientologist, and Dave Turetsky, a wonderful professor at Carnegie Mellon, who's amazing. And they gave this presentation and they made sure that they didn't overlap. They each had different things to say. And then Patty was so proud that she got an honorarium. The deal was they all had to pay their own way, and it had to be totally secret. It was down in New Orleans. But yeah, they wanted to tell these psychiatrists what they were up against, who these Scientologists were. I'm sure it was a really fascinating presentation for these psychiatrists. And Patty was proud that she then got her $600 check for her honorarium, and she still has a picture of it, and she gave it to me to post.
That's right. It's the one and only check I've ever seen from Big Psych
That's right.
to
That's
any of
right.
us. That's right. That's right. They really buy into the whole they're getting paid by big pharma and all of this. They really think that stuff in Scientology. This was really fun for me because it really is a view from the other side, right? And psychiatry is a well, let's just say it's fantastically larger, like Gulliver and the Lilliputians compared to Scientologists. I mean, really is kind of the picture of this. So them being afraid of Scientology is kind of funny, but Todd sort of bookends it a little bit. 1950 story, and then this one. You sort of see, how Scientology grew and just really became a worse and worse and worse version of itself. I mean, where it's trying to take out, destroy these people who are really just trying to help folks who are having a hard time mentally. And they just in this war, because L. Ron Hubbard, the madman, decided to declare war against a bunch of well-intentioned people. It's really so bizarre. It's such a bizarre picture when you actually step back and look at what's going on there. It's a needless fight, you know. But it's always fun getting a little bit of details from the inside. And Patty is, y'all are going to see her on my podcast in a few weeks. She's a firecracker, man. She is awesome. So, all right, Tony. Well, thank you for that breakdown of everything this week. As I'm always want to ask, do we have any concept of what's coming up?
Well, this week we should get Scientology's response on Leah Remini's lawsuit that both sides are
Ah,
appealing. And we've seen Scientology's appeal brief. We've seen Leah's response, and now should be Scientology's reply to that. And I think we will see that before the next time you and I get to talk. So I'm looking forward to that.
awesome. Awesome. All right, good. Well, folks, you heard it here first. Um, it's the gift that keeps on giving, the Church of Scientology, and we're just going to keep reporting on it every week and giving you guys the lowdown on it. Go to Tony's Substack. I'm putting the address right there on the screen right now. Get subscribed, get your daily notifications, check back in with us on Saturdays here for the weekly review, and we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.